Imagine a state where time disappears, distractions vanish, and you perform at your absolute best, effortlessly. What if I told you there's a scientific secret to unlocking this superpower whenever you need it? Prepare to discover the incredible neuroscience behind flow state and how you can intentionally tap into peak performance, transforming your focus and productivity. Welcome to what might be the most transformative exploration of human consciousness and performance you'll ever encounter. Today, we're going deep, really deep, into the neuroscience, psychology, and practical application of flow state, that elusive yet accessible mental zone where peak performance becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Before we dive into the mechanisms, the science, and the strategies, I want you to understand something fundamental. Flow state isn't some mystical experience reserved for elite athletes, world-class musicians, or spiritual masters. It's a natural biological state that every human brain is capable of accessing. Your brain right now, as you're reading or listening to this, possesses all the neural architecture necessary to enter flow. The question isn't whether you can, it's how you will. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to build a complete understanding of flow state from the ground up. We'll explore the neuroscience in fascinating detail, examine the environmental conditions that trigger flow, dissect the psychological components that sustain it, and most importantly, provide you with a comprehensive toolkit of practical strategies you can implement immediately to start experiencing more flow in your daily life. This isn't just about productivity, though flow will absolutely revolutionize how much you accomplish. It's not just about performance, though you'll reach levels you never thought possible. Flow state is fundamentally about experiencing life at its fullest intensity, about being completely, utterly present in what you're doing, whether that's solving a complex problem, creating art, having a conversation, or mastering a physical skill. Part 1. The Gateway to Peak Performance: Understanding Flow. The discovery that changed everything. Let me take you back to the 1960s and 70s, when a Hungarian-American psychologist named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi began asking a simple but profound question. What makes life worth living? Not in a philosophical sense, but in a psychological, experiential sense. When do people feel most alive, most engaged, most fully themselves? Csikszentmihalyi interviewed thousands of people across cultures, professions, and backgrounds: artists, athletes, musicians, surgeons, factory workers, chess players, rock climbers. And he discovered something remarkable. Despite their vastly different activities and circumstances, these people all described moments of optimal experience in strikingly similar terms. They spoke of losing track of time, of actions flowing effortlessly, almost automatically, of emerging between self and activity where self-consciousness disappeared, of being completely absorbed in the present moment with no mental bandwidth left for worries, doubts, or distractions, of performing at their absolute peak, often surprised by their own capabilities. Csikszentmihalyi called this state flow, and his research revealed that these moments weren't random accidents. They followed predictable patterns and occurred under specific conditions. This was revolutionary because it suggested that peak experience wasn't something that just happened to lucky people occasionally. It was a state that could be understood, cultivated, and systematically accessed. Defining flow, more than just focus. So what exactly is flow state? Let's build a comprehensive definition piece by piece. At its core, flow is a state of consciousness where you become so immersed in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience itself is so enjoyable, so intrinsically rewarding, that you'd continue doing it even at great cost, for the sheer sake of doing it. But flow is more than just deep focus or concentration. You can be intensely focused while anxious, stressed, or forcing yourself through willpower. Flow is different. It's characterized by a quality of effortless attention. You're intensely focused, but it doesn't feel like work. Your attention is naturally absorbed by the task, pulled in rather than pushed. Csikszentmihalyi identified several key characteristics that define the flow experience. First, there's complete concentration on the task at hand. Your attention is entirely consumed by what you're doing in the present moment. The mental chatter that normally occupies your consciousness, The planning, worrying, analyzing, judging, all of it quiets down or disappears completely. You're not thinking about thinking, you're just doing. Second, there's a merging of action and awareness. In normal consciousness, there's a separation between you as the actor and the action itself. You're aware of yourself doing something. In flow, this separation dissolves. You don't think, I need to make this move, and then make it. The perception and the response become one seamless process. Athletes often describe this as being the game rather than playing it. Third, there's a loss of self-consciousness. The ego, that voice in your head that's constantly evaluating, judging, and worrying about how you appear to others, temporarily switches off. This doesn't mean you lose consciousness or awareness, quite the opposite. You're intensely aware but not self-aware. You're not monitoring yourself from the outside. You're completely inside the experience. Fourth, time becomes distorted. Hours can pass like minutes, or seconds can stretch into what feels like extended periods. This temporal distortion happens because your brain's normal timekeeping mechanisms are overridden by the demands of the task at hand. Fifth, you receive immediate feedback. You know moment by moment how you're doing. This could be direct feedback like a ball going in a basket, or it could be more subtle. The feeling of your brush on canvas, the response of your code to inputs, the expression on someone's face during conversation. Sixth, there's a perfect balance between challenge and skill. The task is difficult enough to fully engage your capabilities, but not so difficult that it overwhelms you. This creates a sense of control, not the white-knuckled, anxious control where you're forcing an outcome, but a dynamic, responsive control where you feel capable of meeting whatever challenges arise. Seventh, the activity becomes autotelic, worth doing for its own sake. You're not doing it for external rewards or to avoid punishment. The experience itself is the reward. Flow in action, universal yet personal. Now, let's ground this abstract definition in concrete examples, because flow manifests differently across different domains, yet the underlying experience remains remarkably consistent. Consider a basketball player in the zone during a crucial playoff game. The crowd noise fades into background hum. The pressure of the moment, which might normally trigger anxiety, instead focuses attention to a laser point. The player doesn't deliberate over each move. They see the court holistically, anticipating teammates' movements, reading defensive patterns, and responding with actions that feel preordained. Shots that would normally require conscious calculation of angle, force, and arc simply go in. The ball feels magnetically attracted to their hands. Time slows during critical moments, allowing for decisions that seem impossible at normal speed. After the game, they might have only fragmented memories of specific plays because they weren't observing themselves. They were fully merged with the action. Now shift to a programmer deep in flow while solving a complex architectural problem. They've been at it for what feels like maybe an hour. They look up and 6 hours have passed. They haven't eaten, haven't checked their phone, haven't even been particularly aware of their body. The code flows from their fingertips, pattern recognition happening at an intuitive level. They see the entire system in their mind's eye, how components interconnect, where bottlenecks will emerge, how to elegantly solve what seemed like contradictory requirements. The usual struggle of programming, the frustration of bugs, the tedium of syntax, the cognitive load of keeping multiple abstractions in working memory, all of it feels effortless. They're not writing code, they're thinking in code, and the keyboard is just where those thoughts become manifest. Consider a surgeon during a complex operation. Every movement is precise yet fluid. They're processing enormous amounts of information, vitals, visual feedback, tactile sensation, team communication, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. Their hands seem to know what to do before their conscious mind registers the need. Years of training have created such deep expertise that conscious deliberation would actually slow them down. Instead, they're operating from a place of embodied knowledge, their attention fully present with the task, aware of everything relevant while irrelevant stimuli simply don't register. Or think about a musician improvising jazz. They're simultaneously listening to other players, monitoring their own playing, drawing on their technical vocabulary, and creating something new in real time. But it doesn't feel like juggling multiple tasks. It feels like pure expression, like the music is playing itself through them. Theory and technique, which were once consciously learned and laboriously practiced, have become unconscious competencies that free up attention for pure creativity. A writer in flow experiences something similar. The words appear on the screen almost as fast as they can type, sentences forming with a rhythm and structure that would normally require multiple revisions. They're not choosing words are choosing themselves. The characters in their story aren't being moved around like chess pieces. They're acting according to their own logic. The writer is simultaneously creating and discovering what they're writing. Even in conversation, flow can emerge. You've likely experienced this, a discussion where ideas build on each other organically, where you're thinking with someone rather than at them, where insights emerge that neither person could have reached alone. You're fully present, listening completely, responding authentically, and the normal social anxiety about how you're being perceived evaporates. Why flow matters, beyond performance. Before we dive into the neuroscience, I want to address why understanding and cultivating flow matters profoundly, beyond just the obvious performance benefits. First, there's the sheer quality of the experience. Csikszentmihalyi's research revealed that when people were asked about the best moments of their lives, they overwhelmingly described flow experiences, not passive pleasures like watching TV or taking a vacation, but active engagements where they were stretched, challenged, and fully absorbed. Flow, it turns out, is a primary source of life satisfaction and meaning. This makes evolutionary sense. Flow is your brain's way of rewarding you for operating at the edge of your capabilities, for learning, for growth. The neurochemicals released during flow, which we'll explore in detail, create a natural high that's more potent than most artificial rewards. Your brain is essentially telling you, this is what you should be doing. This is what you're designed for. Second, flow is intimately connected with growth and mastery. You can't enter flow by doing things that are too easy. You need sufficient challenge to fully engage your skills. This means flow naturally pushes you toward the edge of your abilities. And because flow feels so rewarding, it creates a positive feedback loop. Challenging yourself leads to flow, which feels amazing, which motivates you to take on more challenges, which builds skill, which allows for even deeper flow states. Third, flow offers a potential solution to some of modern life's most pressing psychological challenges. We live in an epidemic of distraction, anxiety, and disconnection. Our attention is constantly fragmented by devices, notifications, and an overwhelming flood of information. We're physically present but mentally elsewhere, never fully engaged with anything. Flow represents the opposite: complete presence, unified attention, deep engagement. In a fragmented world, flow offers wholeness. Fourth, flow has profound implications for well-being and mental health. During flow, the default mode network of the brain, the system responsible for self-referential thinking, rumination, and the sense of separate self, becomes less active. This means flow provides a natural respite from anxiety, depression, and obsessive thinking. For those struggling with mental health challenges, learning to access flow states can be genuinely therapeutic. Finally, flow points toward questions of human potential that go beyond individual performance. If humans are capable of these peak states where performance, creativity, and well-being all spike simultaneously, what might we achieve collectively if we could help more people access flow more often? What problems could we solve? What art could we create? What kind of society could we build? Part 2. The Brain on Flow Neuroscience Unpacked. Now we're going to journey inside the brain during flow state, and I promise you, what's happening neurologically is even more fascinating than the subjective experience. The prefrontal cortex, the paradox of doing more with less. Let's start with what might be the most counterintuitive finding in flow neuroscience. During flow, parts of your brain actually become less active, not more. Specifically, areas of the prefrontal cortex, the most evolutionarily recent part of your brain, the seat of higher cognitive functions, undergo what neuroscientists call transient hypofrontality. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for executive functions: planning, decision-making, impulse control, self-awareness, sense of time, and that critical inner voice that narrates your experience and judges your actions. It's what makes you human in many ways: your ability to think about the future, to evaluate yourself from an outside perspective, to weigh options rationally. So why would decreasing activity in this crucial region enhance performance? The answer lies in understanding when the prefrontal cortex helps and when it hinders. When you're learning something new, when you need to make careful decisions with incomplete information, when you need to inhibit impulses or override automatic responses, in these situations, an active prefrontal cortex is essential. But once you've developed expertise, once you've internalized patterns and skills deeply, conscious deliberation actually slows you down. Think about learning to drive. Initially, it's overwhelming. You have to consciously think about every action. Press the clutch, shift the gear, release the clutch slowly while applying gas, check mirrors, assess distance to other cars, stay in your lane. Your prefrontal cortex is working overtime, and it's exhausting. But after thousands of hours of practice, these actions become automatic. If you had to consciously think through each step of driving, you'd be much slower and less capable. In flow, transient hypofrontality allows experts to access their deeply trained skills without conscious interference. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, responsible for conscious reasoning and working memory, shows decreased activation. This liberates processing power and allows faster, more intuitive responses. But here's where it gets really interesting. Not all of the prefrontal cortex deactivates. Areas involved in focused attention, goal-directed behavior, and error monitoring remain active or even increase their activity. So you're not becoming less intelligent or less aware during flow. You're shifting from effortful, explicit processing to effortless, implicit processing. You're trading the slow, deliberate system 2 thinking that Daniel Kahneman describes for rapid, intuitive System 1 thinking, but System 1 enhanced by expertise. The deactivation of the medial prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with self-referential thinking and the default mode network, explains the loss of self-consciousness during flow. The voice in your head that says, "How am I doing? What do others think of me? Am I good enough?" That voice gets turned down or off. And paradoxically, when you stop worrying about performing well, you perform better. The diminished time perception during flow also relates to prefrontal deactivation. Your brain's timekeeping functions, which help you track duration and sequence, become less active. Time-stamping events becomes less of a priority because you're completely focused on the present moment, not the past or future. The reward system, motivation's neurochemical foundation. While parts of the prefrontal cortex quiet down, other brain regions become significantly more active during flow. Chief among these is the reward system, a network of structures including the nucleus accumbens, ventral tegmental area, and parts of the prefrontal cortex that do remain active. The reward system is your brain's motivation engine, responsible for pleasure, desire, and reinforcement learning. During flow, this system lights up intensely, which explains why flow feels so inherently rewarding and why we're motivated to seek it out. The primary neurotransmitter of the reward system is dopamine, and understanding dopamine's role in flow is crucial to understanding both why flow feels good and why it enhances performance. Dopamine is often mischaracterized as a pleasure molecule, but its function is more sophisticated than that. Dopamine is actually about motivation, anticipation, and reward prediction. It's released not primarily when you receive a reward, but when you anticipate one and when you're making progress toward it. During flow, dopamine levels can increase by up to 400–500% compared to baseline. This massive dopamine surge has multiple effects. First, it increases motivation and drive. You feel compelled to continue the activity. The elevated dopamine makes the flow activity more rewarding than any alternative, which is why it's so hard to pull yourself away from deep flow. Why programmers code through the night, why artists forget to eat, why athletes want to stay on the field. Second, dopamine enhances pattern recognition. One of dopamine's key cognitive functions is helping you detect patterns, make connections, and notice relationships. This is why flow states are often associated with creative insights and breakthroughs. Your brain is literally better at connecting dots during flow. Third, dopamine improves signal-to-noise ratio in the brain. Neural signals become crisper, more distinct. Relevant information stands out more clearly against irrelevant background noise. This contributes to the heightened focus and clarity characteristic of flow. Fourth, dopamine speeds up information processing. Your brain can handle more information per unit time, which is part of why time feels distorted. You're processing so much that subjectively, more seems to happen in less time. But dopamine isn't working alone. Flow involves a complex cocktail of neurochemicals working in concert. Norepinephrine, the arousal and focus amplifier. Norepinephrine, also dramatically elevated during flow, is your brain's arousal system. It increases heart rate, blood pressure, and glucose availability, preparing your body for action. But more importantly for our purposes, it profoundly affects cognition. Norepinephrine tightens focus by helping to filter out distractions. It increases the signal-to-noise ratio in sensory processing, making relevant stimuli more salient. This is why during flow, distractions that would normally pull your attention simply don't register. The norepinephrine is helping your brain determine what matters and what doesn't. It also speeds up neural processing and improves emotional control. The combination of dopamine and norepinephrine creates a state of focused arousal. You're energized but not scattered, alert but not anxious. Anandamide, the bliss molecule. Here's where flow chemistry gets particularly fascinating. During flow, your brain releases anandamide, an endogenous cannabinoid, an internally produced compound that acts on the same receptors as cannabis. The name anandamide comes from the Sanskrit word ananda, meaning bliss, and for good reason. Anandamide contributes to the sense of well-being and pleasure during flow, but its effects go beyond mood. Anandamide inhibits the release of neurotransmitters that signal pain, fear, and anxiety. This helps explain why extreme athletes in flow can push through pain barriers that would normally stop them, and why flow states feel so free from anxiety despite, often involving high-stakes situations. Anandamide also promotes lateral thinking and creative connections. It literally increases communication across different brain regions, allowing for more innovative combinations of ideas. This is partly why flow states are so conducive to creative breakthroughs. Endorphins, natural pain relief and euphoria. Endorphins, your brain's endogenous opioids, are also elevated during flow, particularly during physically demanding flow states. These powerful neurochemicals serve multiple functions. Most obviously, they provide pain relief and contribute to the euphoric quality of flow. But endorphins also enhance immune function and promote overall well-being. The endorphin release during flow is part of why regular flow experiences are associated with better health outcomes. Serotonin, post-flow contentment. Interestingly, serotonin levels may actually decrease slightly during the height of flow, then spike significantly afterward. This post-flow serotonin surge contributes to feelings of contentment, satisfaction, and inner peace after flow experiences. This may explain a common pattern. During flow, you're intensely engaged and driven. Afterward, you feel a deep sense of accomplishment and calm. The neurochemical profile is different in these two phases, which makes sense. During flow, you need arousal and motivation. After flow, you benefit from recovery and consolidation. The attentional networks, precision focus. Beyond specific neurotransmitters, flow involves characteristic patterns of activation in attention networks. The dorsal attention network, responsible for voluntary, goal-directed attention, shows increased activation during flow. You're actively directing your attention, but it doesn't feel effortful because the activity itself is pulling your attention naturally. Simultaneously, the ventral attention network, which normally responds to unexpected stimuli and potential distractions, becomes less responsive. This is the neural basis for the distraction immunity of flow states. Your brain has essentially turned down the volume on its pay attention to something else system. The anterior cingulate cortex, crucial for error monitoring and conflict resolution, remains active during flow. You're still monitoring performance and making adjustments, but these corrections happen rapidly and feel automatic rather than effortful. Brainwave patterns, the alpha-theta bridge. Now let's explore the electrical dimension of flow, the characteristic brainwave patterns that accompany these neurochemical and activation changes. Your brain's electrical activity occurs at different frequencies, measured in hertz cycles per second. Different frequencies are associated with different states of consciousness. Beta waves, 1230 Hz, dominate normal waking consciousness, especially when you're actively thinking, problem-solving, or experiencing stress and anxiety. Alpha waves, 812 Hz, are associated with relaxed awareness, the state between waking and sleeping, light meditation, and creative ideation. Theta waves, 48 Hz, predominate during deep meditation, light sleep, and dream states. They're associated with deep relaxation, visualization, and accessing the unconscious. Delta waves, 0.54 Hz, are the slowest brain waves, associated with deep, dreamless sleep and unconscious bodily functions. During flow, something remarkable happens. You generate increased alpha and theta waves, even while you're actively engaged in demanding tasks. This is the alpha-theta bridge that characterizes flow states. The increased alpha activity represents a state of relaxed focus. You're alert but not anxious, engaged but not effortful. Alpha waves are also associated with decreased activity in the brain's self-monitoring systems, which connects to the loss of self-consciousness during flow. The theta waves, normally associated with drowsiness or deep meditation, indicate access to deeper processing and intuitive knowing. Theta is where pattern recognition happens, where disparate pieces of information combine into novel insights. The presence of theta during active engagement suggests that flow allows simultaneous access to conscious and unconscious processing. This combination, the alpha-theta bridge with decreased beta, represents an optimal state. You're relaxed enough to avoid anxiety and access intuitive processing, but alert and focused enough for peak performance. You're in a sweet spot between the hyperarousal of anxiety and the underarousal of boredom. Advanced meditators show similar brainwave patterns, which is why meditation is often described as training for flow. Both involve this paradoxical state of relaxed alertness, of being intensely present without effort. Hemispheric synchronization, whole brain engagement. Another fascinating characteristic of flow is increased coherence between brain hemispheres. Normally, different brain regions operate somewhat independently, processing information in parallel. During flow, there's increased communication and synchronization across regions. This whole brain engagement is part of what makes flow so powerful. The left hemisphere, typically associated with analytical, sequential, verbal processing, works in concert with the right hemisphere, associated with holistic, spatial, nonverbal processing. You get both analysis and synthesis, both detail and big picture. This hemispheric synchronization may explain why flow often produces insights that seem to come from nowhere. You're not relying solely on linear, logical thinking. You're also accessing intuitive, pattern-based processing. The two modes inform and enhance each other. Neural efficiency, doing more with less. One of the most striking findings in flow neuroscience is increased neural efficiency. Brain imaging studies show that experts in flow states show less overall brain activation than non-experts performing the same tasks, yet achieve superior performance. This seems paradoxical until you understand neural efficiency. When you first learn something, your brain has to recruit many regions to accomplish the task, using energy and attention inefficiently. As expertise develops, processing becomes localized to specialized neural circuits that accomplish the same task with less activation, less energy expenditure, and less conscious attention. Flow represents the ultimate expression of neural efficiency. Years of practice have created highly optimized neural pathways for the task at hand. During flow, these pathways are activated without the overhead of conscious monitoring and control. It's like the difference between a computer running a program with extensive debugging code versus the same program optimized for production. The result is the same or better, but with dramatically less processing overhead. This efficiency extends to connectivity patterns. During flow, brain regions involved in the task show increased connectivity with each other. They're communicating more effectively, while showing decreased connectivity with task-relevant regions. Your brain has optimized its network architecture for the specific demands of the moment. The neurochemistry of time distortion. Let's dig deeper into one of flow's most characteristic features, altered time perception. Time can seem to slow down, common in extreme sports or emergency situations, or speed up, losing hours to an engaging task. Both phenomena have neurological explanations. The subjective slowing of time during high-stakes moments relates to increased norepinephrine and dopamine. These neurochemicals speed up your internal processing, allowing you to perceive and process more information in a given period. It's like increasing the frame rate of a camera. You capture more frames per second, so you have more information and more time to respond. This is why athletes talk about the ball or game appearing to move in slow motion. The opposite experience, time flying by, relates to decreased activity in the brain's timekeeping regions, parts of the prefrontal cortex and cerebellum. When you're completely absorbed in the present moment, your brain stops keeping track of duration. You're not periodically checking, how long has this taken? You're just doing. Without those periodic timestamps, time becomes unmeasured, and hours can pass unnoticed. Both forms of time distortion indicate deep immersion. When time slows, you're processing so intensely that more fits into each moment. When time speeds up, you're so engaged that measuring duration becomes irrelevant. Either way, you're outside normal time consciousness, which is part of what makes flow feel transcendent. Stress hormones, the Goldilocks zone. Flow also involves an optimal relationship with stress hormones, particularly cortisol. Too much cortisol, the result of excessive stress, impairs cognitive function, kills creativity, and prevents flow. Too little arousal, no cortisol, leads to boredom and lack of engagement. Flow exists in a Goldilocks zone of arousal. Enough challenge and stress to trigger focused attention and neurochemical release, but not so much that it becomes overwhelming. This is why the challenge-skill balance is so crucial to flow, as we'll explore in the next section. During flow, cortisol may be elevated slightly compared to baseline, providing alertness and focus, but not to the levels seen during anxiety or panic. The combination of elevated performance-enhancing neurochemicals, dopamine, norepinephrine with moderate stress hormones creates a state of stimulated calm, energized but not anxious. Neuroplasticity, flow as a learning accelerator. One final crucial aspect of flow neuroscience. The state is incredibly conducive to learning and neuroplastic change. The neurochemical cocktail of flow, particularly the dopamine, enhances synaptic plasticity, making it easier for neurons to form new connections and strengthen existing ones. This means that what you practice during flow states is learned more deeply and retained more durably than the same practice outside of flow. Flow isn't just a state for expressing existing skills, it's an optimal state for acquiring new ones. This creates a virtuous cycle. Practicing at the edge of your abilities triggers flow. Flow enhances learning. Enhanced learning increases skill. Increased skill allows for deeper flow in more challenging situations. This is the neurological basis for the flow growth feedback loop. Part 3. Environmental triggers setting the stage for flow. Understanding the neuroscience of flow is fascinating, but the practical question is, how do you actually get into flow? This brings us to the environmental and psychological triggers, the conditions that make flow more likely to occur. Csikszentmihalyi and subsequent researchers have identified several key triggers that, when present, dramatically increase the probability of entering flow. Let's explore each in depth. Trigger 1. Clear goals. Flow requires knowing what you're trying to accomplish. Not vague aspirations, but clear, immediate goals. The clearer your goal, the easier it is for your brain to engage fully with pursuing it. Clear goals provide direction for attention. Instead of your mind wandering or questioning, "What should I do?" there's an obvious target. This eliminates decision fatigue and internal conflict, allowing full engagement with execution. But clear goals doesn't mean the goals have to be large or complex. In fact, during extended flow experiences, you're often pursuing a series of micro goals. A climber isn't thinking, "Reach the summit." They're focused on the immediate goal. "Get my hand to that hold." A writer might not be thinking about finishing the book. They're focused on completing the sentence, then the paragraph. These proximal goals create a chain of engagement. Each small goal achieved provides a hit of completion, of progress, which sustains motivation and attention. You're constantly hitting achievable targets, which keeps the dopamine system engaged. The goals also need to be congruent with your values and interests. Flow emerges more easily when you care about what you're doing, when the goals matter to you personally. Forced goals, external obligations done purely for instrumental reasons, are less likely to trigger flow because the motivation is extrinsic rather than intrinsic. In practice, setting clear goals for flow means breaking large objectives into specific, actionable steps. Instead of work on project, you might specify, draft the introduction section, or solve the database query problem, or complete the third movement. The more specific, the better. Trigger 2, immediate feedback. Flow requires knowing, moment by moment, how you're doing. Immediate feedback keeps you engaged because you're constantly receiving information about your performance, allowing for continuous adjustment. Think about why video games are so effective at inducing flow. They provide constant feedback, points scored, levels completed, visual and auditory cues about success or failure. You never wonder, "How am I doing?" The game tells you instantly. In the real world, feedback can be more subtle but is equally important. A musician receives immediate feedback from the sound they produce. A programmer gets feedback when their code runs or doesn't. An athlete feels the feedback through their body, the ball's trajectory, the feel of the movement. A conversationalist receives feedback through the other person's responses. The immediacy is crucial. Delayed feedback, like waiting weeks for a performance review or months for publication, doesn't create flow. By the time you receive the feedback, you've mentally moved on. You're no longer in the moment of performance. Feedback also needs to be relevant and interpretable. If you're receiving information but don't know what it means or how to use it, it doesn't help. This is why expertise matters for flow. Experts can extract meaningful feedback from subtle signals that beginners might miss entirely. In some domains, feedback is naturally built into the activity. In others, you need to engineer it. A writer might not get immediate feedback from readers, but they can develop the skill of evaluating their own work, recognizing when a sentence flows well or feels awkward. A person working on a long-term project might create milestones that provide feedback checkpoints. The psychological effect of immediate feedback is that it keeps you tethered to the present moment. You're not ruminating about the past or anxious about the future. You're responding to right now, which is the essence of flow. Trigger 3, challenge skill balance. This is perhaps the most critical trigger for flow, and understanding it deeply is essential. Flow occurs when the challenge of an activity is perfectly matched to your skill level, or more precisely, when the challenge is about 4% higher than your current skill level. Let's unpack why this balance is so crucial. If a task is too easy relative to your skills, you become bored. Your brain isn't sufficiently engaged, attention wanders, and the activity feels meaningless. There's no risk, no growth, no excitement. This is the domain of apathy or relaxation, but not flow. If a task is too difficult relative to your skills, you become anxious or frustrated. You can't meet the demands, you're constantly failing, and the experience is stressful rather than absorbing. This is the domain of anxiety or overwhelm. Flow exists in the narrow channel between boredom and anxiety, where you're stretched but not broken, challenged but capable. The 4% rule is fascinating. It suggests that maximum engagement occurs when you're operating just beyond your comfort zone. Not in your comfort zone, too easy, and not wildly beyond it, too hard, but just at the edge. This is where learning happens most efficiently and where flow is most accessible. This balance is dynamic, not static. As your skills grow, you need greater challenges to maintain flow. This creates a growth spiral. Flow requires challenge. Challenge builds skill. Increased skill requires new challenges. New challenges create flow at higher levels. This is why people who regularly experience flow continually progress in their domains. Flow naturally pulls you toward mastery. The challenge doesn't have to be external. Internal challenges work too. A master pianist might create flow not by playing a harder piece, but by pursuing a more refined interpretation of a familiar piece, or by imposing constraints like playing with particular emotional nuance or technical precision. Different people have different skill levels, which means the same activity can trigger flow for one person while being boring or anxiety-inducing for another. A black diamond ski run might create flow for an expert, but terror for a beginner. A simple coding problem might bore a senior developer, but flow for someone still learning. This personalization of challenge is key. You can't copy someone else's flow activities and expect the same result. You need to find the challenge skill's sweet spot for you, right now, with your current capabilities. In practice, managing the challenge skill balance means regularly assessing your current skill level honestly. Not overestimating or underestimating, accurate self-assessment is crucial. Deliberately seeking challenges slightly above your current level. This might mean taking on projects at the edge of your capabilities, setting personal bests, or adding constraints that increase difficulty. Breaking overwhelm. If you find yourself in the anxiety zone, the solution isn't to power through, it's to break the challenge into smaller pieces, each of which hits the right balance. Difficult projects can be approached one flow-inducing chunk at a time. Ramping up when bored. If you're consistently finding an activity too easy, it's time to increase the stakes, compete against better opponents, impose time constraints, raise quality standards, or move to more complex problems. Trigger 4. High consequences, risk. Flow is more likely when the stakes are high, when there are meaningful consequences for your performance. Risk focuses attention wonderfully. This doesn't necessarily mean physical risk, though extreme athletes definitely leverage physical risk for flow. The consequences can be reputational, financial, creative, or social. What matters is that you care about the outcome, that it feels significant. High consequences trigger the release of stress hormones and neurochemicals that enhance focus. Your brain recognizes this matters and allocates resources accordingly. Distractions become irrelevant when there's something important on the line. This is why people often perform at their best under pressure. The pressure triggers physiological and psychological states conducive to peak performance. The key is having enough pressure to focus attention without so much that it tips into overwhelming anxiety. Some people actively court risk to access flow more reliably. Athletes push physical limits, entrepreneurs stake resources on uncertain ventures, artists put their work into the world knowing it will be judged. The risk amplifies engagement. For those not naturally drawn to risk, you can engineer appropriate stakes. Deadlines create temporal pressure. Public commitments create social pressure. Competing or collaborating with skilled peers creates performance pressure. Tracking and measuring your own performance creates internal standards to meet. The sweet spot is rich. Failure is possible and would be meaningful, but isn't catastrophic. You want enough risk to focus attention, but not so much that fear overwhelms capability. Trigger 5. Deep embodiment, complete concentration. Flow requires full absorption in the task, all of your attention on what you're doing right now. This is both a trigger for flow, concentration helps initiate it, and a characteristic of flow. Once in flow, concentration is effortless. Deep embodiment means engaging multiple sensory channels. Physical activities naturally involve embodiment, but cognitive tasks can too. When you're deeply engaged with an intellectual problem, you're not just thinking abstractly. You're visualizing, maybe gesturing, fully inhabiting the conceptual space. Embodiment pulls attention out of your head and into direct experience. This is part of why mind-body practices like yoga, martial arts, or dance are effective gateways to flow. They require attention to physical sensation, which anchors consciousness in the present moment. The opposite of embodiment is dissociation, being in your head, overthinking, observing yourself from the outside. This metacognitive distance prevents flow. Flow requires collapsing the observer and the observed, being the action rather than watching yourself do it. Practices that enhance embodiment, breathwork, body scans, sensory awareness exercises, can help develop the capacity for this kind of full attention engagement. Trigger 6. Distraction-free environment. Flow is fragile, especially when you're entering it. External interruptions, notifications, noise, people interrupting, can instantly break the state. Even the potential for interruption can prevent flow from forming because part of your attention remains vigilant for distraction. Creating a distraction-free environment means physical space design, an environment set up to minimize interruptions. This might mean a closed door, noise-canceling headphones, turning off notifications, or working in a dedicated space associated with focused work. Time boundaries, protecting blocks of uninterrupted time. Flow typically takes 15-20 minutes to form fully, so you need at least this much guaranteed undisturbed time. Many people find that 91 20-minute blocks are optimal for deep flow work. Digital hygiene. Eliminating digital distractions is particularly important because they're so insidious. Phones are attention black holes. Even having one visible on your desk reduces cognitive capacity. Apps, email, social media, all designed to be maximally distracting, need to be blocked or removed during flow time. Internal distractions. External environment is only part of the equation. Internal distractions, worries, to-do lists, emotional concerns, can be equally disruptive. Practices like journaling before flow work or meditation can help clear internal mental clutter. Some people benefit from environmental cues that signal flow kaitakitsla music, lighting, location, or pre-flow rituals. These cues condition your brain. When these conditions are present, it's time to focus deeply. The modern world is increasingly hostile to flow. We're bombarded with stimuli designed to capture attention. Creating flow-conducive environments is an act of resistance against a culture of distraction, and it's increasingly necessary for anyone wanting to do deep, meaningful work. Trigger 7. Autotelic experience, intrinsic motivation. Flow emerges most reliably when you're doing something for its own sake, not for external rewards. When the activity itself is the reward, when you find it inherently interesting, enjoyable, or meaningful, flow is much more accessible. Autotelic comes from Greek auto, self, and telos, goal or purpose. An autotelic experience is self-contained, complete in itself. You're not doing it to get somewhere else. The doing is the point. Intrinsic motivation creates psychological conditions ideal for flow. When you're intrinsically motivated, you're more likely to persist through difficulty because the engagement itself is rewarding, not just the outcome. You're less self-conscious because you're not performing for external judgment or rewards. You're more creative and willing to take risks because you're not anxiously protecting against failure. You're more likely to enter the challenge skills sweet spot because you're naturally drawn to activities that optimally engage your capabilities. The contrast with extrinsic motivation is stark. When you're doing something purely for money, grades, approval, or to avoid punishment, flow is much harder to access. The external focus keeps part of your attention on how will this be judged, rather than fully immersing in the task itself. This doesn't mean external rewards eliminate flow. Professional athletes experience flow while competing for prizes. Writers can flow while on deadline for pay. But the external reward works best when it's aligned with intrinsic interest. The athlete loves the sport and the prize enhances it. The writer finds writing meaningful, and the payment allows more of it. Cultivating intrinsic motivation involves connecting activities to your values. Why does this matter to you? How does it express who you are or who you want to become? Finding the interesting aspects. Even in tasks with boring elements, there are usually interesting challenges if you look for them. The key is shifting focus to what engages you. Giving yourself autonomy. Flow is more accessible when you have some control over how you approach a task, rather than following rigid external dictates. Developing competence. As you become more skilled at something, it often becomes more intrinsically interesting. Competence is inherently rewarding. The group flow triggers. Everything so far has focused on individual flow, but flow can also be collective. Teams, bands, companies, even entire organizations can enter group flow states. Group flow has additional triggers beyond the individual ones. Shared goals. The group needs clear, aligned objectives that everyone is working toward. Close listening. Deep attention to each other, not just to the task. Each person is attuned to others' contributions, responding and building on them. Equal participation. Everyone contributes. When participation is imbalanced, one person dominating or others disengaging, group flow breaks. Familiarity with teammates. Group flow is easier with people who know each other's styles, strengths, and communication patterns. There's an implicit understanding that reduces friction. Blending egos. Individual ego needs subsumed to collective goals. It's not about individual glory but group achievement. Risk and consequences for the group. Shared stakes that affect everyone equally. Good communication. Open, honest, real-time feedback loops within the group. The phenomenology of group flow is distinct from individual flow. There's a sense of collective mind, where ideas emerge from the interaction rather than any single person. The group develops a rhythm, a shared timing, almost like a single organism. Jazz ensembles, sports teams, surgical teams, and creative collaborations can all access this state. Group flow can be even more potent than individual flow in some ways. The collective energy, the creative synergy, the sense of being part of something larger than yourself. But it's also more fragile, requiring all the triggers to align across multiple people simultaneously. Part 4. The psychology of flow internal conditions. Beyond environmental triggers, there are psychological and attentional factors that either enable or prevent flow. Let's explore the internal landscape that supports flow states. The role of attention. At its core, flow is about attention, specifically, the quality and focus of attention. Understanding how attention works helps explain both what flow is and how to cultivate it. Normally, your attention is divided. Part of you is doing a task, part is monitoring how you're doing, part is thinking about what to do next, part is aware of your environment, part is processing unrelated thoughts. Attention is fragmented across multiple objects and processes. Flow represents unified attention, all of your attentional resources directed at a single point. The monitoring, planning, and self-awareness don't disappear entirely, but they become integrated into the flow of action rather than separate meta-processes. Think of attention as a spotlight. In normal consciousness, that spotlight rapidly jumps around or splits into multiple weaker beams. In flow, it becomes a single, intensely focused beam on the task at hand. Everything outside that beam fades into background. This unified attention is partly why flow feels so good. Normally, the division of attention creates subtle stress. You're never fully anywhere, always a bit scattered. Unified attention brings psychological coherence, a sense of wholeness that's deeply satisfying. Several attentional capacities support flow. Sustained attention, the ability to maintain focus over time without drifting. This is trainable through practices like meditation. Selective attention, the ability to focus on relevant information while filtering out irrelevant stimuli. Again, trainable. Attentional control, the ability to direct your attention voluntarily rather than having it pulled by external stimuli or internal impulses. This metacognitive capacity is crucial. Attention without attachment, being fully present with whatever is occurring without clinging to preferred outcomes. This allows fluid response to changing conditions. Presence and mindfulness. Flow is fundamentally a state of present moment awareness. You're not thinking about the past or future. You're completely absorbed in now. This is why mindfulness practices are such effective training for flow. They develop the capacity to be present. Mindfulness, non-judgmental awareness of present experience, shares many characteristics with flow. Both involve present moment focus. Both include decreased, self-referential thinking. Both involve acceptance of experience as it arises. Both create a sense of clarity and vividness. The main difference is that mindfulness is typically practiced in states of relaxation, sitting meditation, walking slowly, while flow occurs during active engagement. But the attentional skills are transferable. People with regular mindfulness practices report easier entry into flow states, deeper and longer duration flow, better ability to return to flow after interruptions, greater awareness of when they're in flow versus normal consciousness. Mindfulness trains the ability to notice when attention has wandered and gently return it to the chosen object. This same capacity allows you to notice early signs of distraction during flow work and redirect attention before flow breaks. Mindfulness also reduces mental reactivity, the tendency to have strong emotional reactions to experience. This equanimity is valuable during flow because it prevents the anxiety or frustration that can interrupt the state. When difficulties arise, as they will, you respond adaptively rather than reactively. The challenge of overthinking. One of the greatest obstacles to flow is overthinking, excessive self-monitoring, and conscious control. The voice in your head that says, "Am I doing this right? What will people think? What should I do next?" This metacognitive chatter is antithetical to flow. Overthinking emerges from several sources. Perfectionism, setting impossible standards, then anxiously monitoring whether you're meeting them. The anxiety and self-judgment prevent the relaxed focus flow requires. Self-consciousness, excessive awareness of yourself as an object of others' perception. Instead of being absorbed in the activity, you're worried about how you appear. Lack of trust, not trusting your skills or intuition, so you try to consciously control every element. But conscious control is slow and effortful compared to the rapid, intuitive responses flow enables. Fear of failure, anxiety about outcomes diverts attention from process. You can't fully engage with what you're doing because you're worried about how it will turn out. All of these forms of overthinking involve the prefrontal cortex maintaining executive control when it would be better to let automated systems handle the task. It's like a CEO micromanaging every employee. Nothing flows smoothly. The paradox is that trying not to overthink often increases overthinking. It's like the classic instruction, "Don't think about a pink elephant." The instruction itself creates the thought. The solution isn't to try to stop thinking, but to redirect attention to the task itself. When you notice overthinking, return attention to the sensory, immediate, concrete aspects of what you're doing. Feel the keyboard under your fingers. See the canvas in front of you. Hear the notes you're playing. Grounded, sensory attention crowds out abstract self-monitoring. Another approach is accepting overthinking when it occurs without getting caught in it. "I notice I'm worrying about how this will be received" becomes just another observed phenomenon, not something you need to fix. The thought arises, is noted, and attention returns to the task. The confidence-competence loop. Flow requires a certain baseline of confidence, not arrogant overconfidence, but realistic trust in your capabilities. If you don't believe you can meet the challenge, anxiety dominates and flow is impossible. But confidence and competence create a feedback loop. Competence breeds confidence. Confidence enables better performance builds competence. Flow accelerates this loop. When you achieve flow, you experience yourself performing at a high level. This visceral experience of capability strengthens self-efficacy. your belief in your ability to meet challenges. The next time you face a similar challenge, you enter with more confidence, making flow more accessible. Conversely, lack of confidence can create a vicious cycle. If you doubt your abilities, you approach challenges anxiously, which prevents flow, which means you don't perform well, which confirms your doubts, which increases future anxiety. Breaking out of a confidence deficit requires starting with achievable challenges where flow is likely. Success breeds confidence. Attributing success to your growing skill, not external factors or luck. Own your capabilities. Reframing failure as information and opportunity for growth, not identity-level judgment. A failed attempt doesn't make you a failure, it gives you data. Seeking constructive feedback focused on improvement, not just evaluation. Feedback that helps you grow builds confidence. Feedback that only judges undermines it. Celebrating flow experiences themselves, regardless of outcome. I was fully absorbed for 2 hours is success, even if the result wasn't perfect. The balance of trying and allowing. One of the subtler psychological aspects of flow is the balance between effort and effortlessness, between trying and allowing. Flow feels effortless, but that doesn't mean no effort is involved. Rather, the effort is in engaging with the challenge, not in forcing an outcome. Think of the difference between a river flowing downhill, allowing, and pumping water uphill, forcing. Flow is like the river, movement is natural, following the path of least resistance, yet tremendously powerful. Forcing is exhausting and inefficient by comparison. In flow, effort manifests as engagement with the challenge. You're trying to solve the problem, make the shot, create the art. You're not passive. Directing attention. You're choosing where to focus, what to engage with. This is volitional. Making adjustments. You're responding to feedback, correcting course. This requires effort. But several things are not effortful in flow. Maintaining concentration. Attention is naturally absorbed, not forced. Accessing relevant skills. They arise automatically in response to demands. Making decisions. They feel obvious, intuitive, immediate. Sustaining motivation. Engagement is self-sustaining. You don't have to convince yourself to continue. The balance point is engaging fully while releasing attachment to specific outcomes. You're trying to write a great sentence, but you're not anxiously controlling every word. You're trying to make the shot, but you're not tense and overthinking mechanics. You're trying to solve the problem, but you're not forcing a solution. This balance is cultivated through experience. Initially, most people either unkungaja, spacing out, not really trying, or ovkungaja, forcing, straining. With practice, you learn the middle path, full engagement with relaxed intensity. Emotional regulation and flow. Emotions significantly affect flow accessibility. Certain emotional states are conducive to flow, others prevent it. Emotions compatible with flow. Interest and curiosity. These pull attention naturally toward the activity. Excitement and anticipation. These create energizing arousal without anxiety. Joy and playfulness. These create the psychological safety to explore and take risks. Contentment and calm. These provide the equanimity that sustains focus. Emotions incompatible with flow. Anxiety and worry. These fragment attention and create tension. Anger and frustration. These narrow focus in rigid, reactive ways. Sadness and depression. These sap motivation and energy. Overwhelm. This scattered confusion makes unified attention impossible. This doesn't mean you need to be in a perfect mood to access flow. But emotional regulation, the ability to work with your emotional state constructively, supports flow. If you're anxious, acknowledging it, taking a few deep breaths, and consciously relaxing can shift you into a state where flow becomes possible. If you're frustrated, taking a brief break, reframing the challenge, or approaching it from a different angle can help. Some people find that physical activity, a short walk, some stretching, helps reset emotional state before flow work. Others use music, breathing exercises, or journaling to process emotions that might interfere with focus. The goal isn't emotional suppression, but emotional integration. You can acknowledge, I'm feeling anxious about this deadline, without letting that anxiety control your attention. The emotion is present but doesn't dominate. This metacognitive relationship with emotion, being with emotions rather than consumed by them, is another skill mindfulness cultivates. Identity and flow. There's an interesting relationship between identity and flow. Flow involves temporary ego dissolution. The sense of separate self diminishes. But paradoxically, repeated flow experiences can strengthen a certain kind of identity. When you regularly experience flow in a domain, that domain often becomes part of your identity. I am a writer, or I am a climber, or I am a musician becomes not just a description of activities you do, but a core sense of who you are. This identity, in turn, supports deeper engagement and more frequent flow. However, rigid identity can also interfere with flow if it creates pressure or fear. If your identity is strongly attached to being good at something, you might become so concerned with maintaining that identity that you can't relax into flow. The fear of not living up to your identity creates performance anxiety. The sweet spot seems to be identifying with the process rather than the outcome. I am someone who writes rather than I am a good writer. The first creates commitment to engagement. The second creates pressure about results. Flexible identity, holding your self-concept lightly, being willing to be a beginner, not needing to prove yourself, supports flow. Rigid identity, needing to maintain a certain image, fearing exposure as inadequate, inhibits it. The recovery and consolidation cycle. Flow isn't meant to be constant. The neurochemicals and neural activation patterns of flow are intense, and sustaining them indefinitely would be exhausting. Flow naturally alternates with recovery periods. Understanding this cycle prevents the mistake of trying to force continuous flow, which inevitably leads to burnout and diminishing returns. The cycle looks like this. Struggle, you engage with a challenge, working to solve problems and develop understanding. This phase can feel frustrating and effortful. It activates learning, but isn't yet flow. Release, you take a break, physically or mentally disengaging. This might be a walk, a workout, sleep, or just switching to an easy task. During release, conscious processing stops, but unconscious processing continues. Flow, you return to the challenge and find yourself in the zone. The struggle phase primed your brain. The release phase allowed consolidation. Now everything clicks. Recovery, after flow, you need recovery. The neurochemical flood and intense focus are taxing. This might be rest, lighter work, social interaction, or different activities. Consolidation, the learning and insights from flow need to be integrated. This happens during recovery and especially during sleep. Your brain is strengthening neural pathways and integrating new understanding. Honoring this cycle means not expecting immediate flow. Sometimes you need the struggle phase first. Taking breaks strategically. When stuck, rather than forcing, take a release break. Protecting recovery time. After intense flow sessions, don't immediately jump into more demanding work. Getting adequate sleep. This is when consolidation happens most effectively. Alternating flow activities with complementary activities. If your flow work is cognitive, physical activity provides balance. If it's physical, cognitive rest helps. Many people find natural rhythms, certain times of day when flow is more accessible, certain days of the week where deep work is easier. Working with these natural patterns rather than against them improves overall flow frequency and quality. Part 5. Practical strategies cultivating your flow superpowers. Now we arrive at the most practical section. Concrete strategies you can implement to increase flow in your life. This will synthesize everything we've covered into actionable approaches. Strategy 1. Create a flow-friendly lifestyle design. Flow doesn't exist in isolation from the rest of your life. The conditions that support flow need to be built into your daily structures and habits. Schedule architecture. Design your calendar to include substantial blocks of uninterrupted time. For most people, this means protecting mornings for deep work if you're a morning person, or evenings if not. Scheduling meetings and administrative tasks in clusters, leaving other periods clear. Setting boundaries around communication, specific times for email messages rather than constant responsiveness. Building in recovery time after flow sessions. Planning weeks with rhythm, intense focus days alternating with lighter days. Energy management. Flow requires energy. This means prioritizing sleep. Most people need 7-9 hours for optimal cognitive function. Strategic use of caffeine and nutrition. Stable energy rather than spikes and crashes. Physical exercise. Regular movement improves cognitive function and emotional regulation. Managing stress. Chronic high stress depletes resources needed for flow. Taking vacations and genuine breaks. Extended recovery periods prevent burnout. Environmental design. Set up your physical space to support flow. Dedicated workspace associated with focused work. Minimal visual distractions. Good lighting, comfortable temperature, ergonomic setup. Everything you need within reach, so you don't break focus for basic needs. Symbolic markers that signal flow space. Particular items, lighting, music. Digital boundaries. In the modern world, this is crucial. Phone in another room, or in a locked drawer during flow time. App blockers preventing access to distracting sites apps. Email and messaging turned off or set to do not disturb. Browser extensions that limit distractions. Separate devices for work versus entertainment to create clear contexts. Social boundaries, protecting flow time from social interruptions. Communicating your focus time to family, roommates, colleagues. Setting expectations about response time, teaching people you won't be immediately available. Creating visual signals, closed door, headphones, do not disturb sign that indicate focus time. Grouping social obligations to preserve large uninterrupted blocks. Strategy 2. Develop pre-flow rituals. Rituals serve as psychological and physiological priming for flow. They signal to your brain and body, it's time to focus deeply. Effective pre-flow rituals might include physical elements, specific music or sounds, binaural beats, ambient music, nature sounds. Particular beverage, tea, coffee, water with lemon. Physical movements, stretching, brief exercise, breathing exercises. Lighting adjustments, dimming lights, turning on task lighting. Aromatherapy, certain scents associated with focus. Cognitive elements. Brief meditation or breathing exercise, 5-10 minutes. Reviewing goals and intentions for the session. Journaling to clear mental clutter. Visualization of successful engagement. Reading something inspiring or relevant. Transitional elements. Closing all unrelated tabs and applications. Putting phone away. Tidying workspace. Setting a timer for the flow session. Writing, do not disturb on your door or status. The key is consistency. The ritual needs to be repeated before flow sessions until it becomes a conditioned cue. Over time, simply starting the ritual begins the physiological and psychological shifts that facilitate flow. The ritual should take 5-15 minutes typically, long enough to create a genuine transition, but not so long it becomes a form of procrastination. The goal is readiness, not perfection. Strategy 3. Master the challenge skill balance. We've discussed how crucial the challenge skill sweet spot is for flow. Here's how to actively manage it. Skill assessment. Regularly evaluate your current capabilities honestly. Where are you truly skilled? Where are you still developing? What are your weaknesses? This requires both self-reflection and external feedback. Challenge selection. Based on your skill assessment, deliberately choose challenges slightly above your current level. If working on a large project, identify which aspects will stretch you appropriately. Set personal bests. Can you write faster, code more elegantly, solve harder problems? Add constraints that increase difficulty, time limits, Specific criteria, higher standards. Seek competition or collaboration with people slightly better than you. Dynamic adjustment. During the activity, if you notice boredom or anxiety, adjust. For boredom, increase the pace. Add complexity or constraints. Raise your standards. Shift to more challenging aspects of the task. For anxiety, break the challenge into smaller pieces. Focus on one aspect at a time. Lower stakes temporarily to build confidence. Review fundamentals to shore up weak areas. Progressive growth. Systematically increase challenge over time as skills develop. This might mean keeping a training log that tracks progress. Regularly attempting tasks just beyond current ability. Seeking feedback that identifies next-level skills to develop. Studying advanced techniques and gradually incorporating them. The 4% rule, challenging should be about 4% beyond current skill, is a guideline, not a law. The key is finding your personal sweet spot, enough challenge to require full attention, not so much that you're overwhelmed. This sweet spot will feel different for different people and different tasks. Strategy 4. Practice attention training. Since flow is fundamentally about quality of attention, deliberately training attention is one of the most powerful flow cultivation strategies. Meditation. This is probably the most effective attention training available. Different types of meditation train different attentional capacities. Focused attention meditation. Concentrating on a single object, breath, mantra, visual point, trains sustained attention and the ability to notice and redirect when attention wanders. Start with 5-10 minutes daily, gradually increasing. Open monitoring meditation. Maintaining broad, non-reactive awareness of whatever arises trains flexible attention and metacognitive awareness. This is slightly more advanced. Body scan. Moving attention systematically through the body trains precision of attention and bodily awareness. Loving kindness or visualization practices. These train the ability to generate and sustain particular states, which can be applied to generating flow-conducive mental states. Consistency matters more than duration. 10 minutes daily is more effective than 1 hour weekly. The brain changes you're cultivating require repeated practice. Everyday attention exercises. Single tasking. Choose ordinary activities, eating, walking, showering, and practice doing only that, with full attention. Notice when attention wanders and gently return it. Deep reading. Read long-form content books, essays without interruption, practicing sustained attention on complex ideas. Device-free periods. Regular intervals where you're completely away from screens, practicing attention without digital inputs. Nature time. Spending time in natural settings naturally restores attention and practices open awareness. Focused conversation. During conversations, practice complete listening without planning your response or letting your mind wander. Attention recovery. Modern life depletes attention through constant stimulation. Building in recovery for your attentional system is important. Regular breaks from focused work, Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes focus, 5 minutes break. Screen breaks looking at distant objects, being in nature, resting eyes. Daydreaming time, periods where mind wandering is allowed, which restores attentional resources. Adequate sleep, sleep deprivation severely impairs attention. Strategy 5, optimize your physiology. Flow is an embodied state. Your physical condition affects your ability to access it. Sleep, this cannot be overstated. Sleep deprivation impairs attention and increases distraction, reduces cognitive capacity, increases emotional reactivity, prevents memory consolidation, diminishes creativity. Most adults need 7-9 hours. Sleep quality matters as much as quantity. Consistent schedule, dark room, cool temperature. Minimal screens before bed. Nutrition. Stable blood sugar supports stable attention. This means balanced meals with protein, healthy fats, complex carbs. avoiding blood sugar spikes and crashes from simple sugars. Adequate hydration. Even mild dehydration impairs cognition. Strategic caffeine use. Moderate amounts can enhance focus, but too much creates jittery anxiety. Avoiding large meals before flow work. Digestion diverts energy. Exercise. Regular physical activity enhances flow in multiple ways. Improves overall cognitive function. Increases neuroplasticity. Regulates mood and reduces anxiety. Provides release for physical tension. Can itself be a flow activity. Both cardiovascular exercise and strength training have cognitive benefits. Even brief exercise, 10-15 minutes before cognitive work, can prime flow. Breathwork, conscious breathing exercises can induce flow-conducive states. Box breathing, 4-4-4-4. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, increases calm focus. Wim Hof method creates energized alertness. Simple deep breathing activates parasympathetic nervous system, reducing stress. Posture and embodiment. Physical state influences mental state. Upright, open posture enhances confidence and energy. Awareness of body reduces rumination and increases presence. Movement breaks prevent physical discomfort from breaking focus. Substances and flow. It's worth addressing. Moderate caffeine can facilitate flow for many people. Increases alertness without anxiety. Alcohol impairs cognition and makes flow unlikely. Cannabis has mixed effects. Some people report enhanced flow for creative tasks, but it impairs many cognitive functions. Nicotine can increase focus, but has obvious health drawbacks. Stimulants, prescription or otherwise, can create forced focus that's not the same as flow. Psychedelics have been studied for flow, but are complex. Not a recommendation, just acknowledging research. The general principle: work with your natural neurochemistry rather than trying to artificially force states. Healthy baseline physiology makes flow accessible. Poor physiology makes it nearly impossible. Strategy 6. Build flow-conducive habits and routines. Habits reduce decision fatigue and create reliable conditions for flow. Key habits to develop. Consistent timing. Flow becomes more accessible when you work on challenging tasks at consistent times. Your brain begins to anticipate and prepare. For many people, this means deep work during biological prime time, when cognitive function peaks, often morning for most people. Lighter work during cognitive valleys, often early afternoon. Creative work when mind is slightly tired, often evening. Less filtered, more associative. Startup routine, a consistent routine that initiates flow sessions. Same location and setup. Same music or environmental conditions. Same brief ritual, as discussed earlier. Reviewing intention and goals. Removing distractions. This becomes automated. You don't have to think about getting ready. You just do the routine and you're ready. Closure routine, a consistent way to end flow sessions. Noting progress and accomplishments. Identifying next steps for next session. Tidying workspace. Brief reflection or journaling. Transitioning intentionally to next activity. This provides psychological completion and makes re-entry easier next time. Weekly planning. Regular planning sessions, often Sunday evening or Monday morning, where you review the week ahead. Identify key flow opportunities. Block calendar time for deep work. Prepare materials and clarify goals. Anticipate obstacles and plan around them. This removes uncertainty and decision-making during the week, allowing more energy for actual flow work. Daily mini planning. Brief morning planning, 5-10 minutes identifying. Top priority for the day. Specific goals for flow session. Potential obstacles and solutions. Tracking. Some people find that tracking flow experiences increases them. Noting when you experienced flow. What conditions were present? How long it lasted? What triggered it or ended it? How you felt afterward? Over time, Patterns emerge that you can leverage. This metacognitive awareness helps optimize conditions. Strategy 7. Work with flow in groups. Since much meaningful work happens in teams, cultivating group flow is valuable. For leaders, creating conditions for team flow. Structure. Clear, shared goals that everyone understands and cares about. Appropriate challenge level for the team. Defined roles, where everyone can contribute meaningfully. Autonomy within structure. People have freedom in how they accomplish objectives. Communication. Open, honest communication norms. Regular feedback loops. Active listening training. Psychological safety. People can take risks, make mistakes, share ideas without fear. Rhythm. Regular collaboration sessions. Shared rituals that create team cohesion. Alternation between collaborative and individual work. Celebration of team flow experiences. Physical environment. Space designed for collaboration. Whiteboards, comfortable seating, minimal distractions. Technology that supports rather than hinders. Good video conferencing, shared documents. Dedicated time and space for team flow work. For individuals, contributing to group flow. Come prepared. Do individual work beforehand so group time is high value. Practice deep listening. Really hear and build on others' ideas. Manage ego. Focus on group success rather than individual recognition. Match the energy. Attune to the group's state and contribute appropriately. Be present. Give full attention. Don't multitask. Take risks. Share ideas even when uncertain. Support others. Help teammates shine rather than competing. Group flow activities. Brainstorming and ideation sessions. Collaborative problem solving. Team sports and physical activities. Musical or artistic collaboration. Shared learning experiences. Mission-driven projects with shared purpose. Strategy 8. Use technology strategically. While technology can be flow's enemy, distractions, it can also be an ally when used intentionally. Flow-supportive technology. Website and app blockers. Freedom, cold turkey, focus. Block distracting sites during flow time. Forest, gamifies staying off phone. Screen time, digital well-being, system-level limits. Focus tools. Brain, FM, AI-generated music designed for focus. Noisely, My Noise, customizable ambient sounds. Tide, calm, meditation and focus timers. Flow state apps, track and encourage flow sessions. Productivity systems. Time blocking apps that visualize focus time. Project management tools that clarify goals and progress. Note-taking systems, Roam, Obsidian, Notion, that externalize thinking. Pomodoro timers that structure focus and breaks. Biofeedback. Heart rate variability monitors that indicate stress versus calm. EEG headbands, Muse, etc., that provide brainwave feedback. Wearables that track sleep and recovery. Learning tools. Spaced repetition systems, Anki, for skill building. Platforms for deliberate practice in specific domains. Online courses that provide structure and challenge. The key is using technology intentionally rather than reactively. Technology should support your goals, not hijack your attention. Strategy 9. Develop domain-specific expertise. Flow becomes more accessible as expertise deepens. The relationship is direct. More skill equals more flow potential, assuming you maintain appropriate challenge. Deliberate practice. Not just repetition, but focused practice on edge-of-ability skills. Identify weak points specifically. Design exercises targeting those weaknesses. Get feedback on performance. Push just beyond current capability. Reflect on what's working and what isn't. This is effortful and often not flow itself, but it builds the competence that makes flow possible. Mental models. Develop rich conceptual frameworks in your domain. Study exemplars and masters. Learn underlying principles, not just techniques. Build pattern libraries. Recognize common structures. Develop intuitions about what works. Deep models allow rapid pattern recognition during flow, where you intuitively see solutions without conscious analysis. Diversification. Breadth within your domain enhances flow. Learning adjacent skills creates more connections. Cross-training prevents rigid thinking. Varied practice maintains interest and challenge. Interdisciplinary insights create novel combinations. Mentorship. Learning from someone ahead of you accelerates development. Feedback shortens the learning curve. Modeling shows what's possible. Accountability maintains consistency. Guidance helps navigate plateaus. Teaching others deepens your own understanding. Explaining clarifies your own thinking. Questions reveal gaps in knowledge. Different perspectives expand your view. Helping others succeed is intrinsically rewarding. Long-term commitment. Flow in a domain typically requires years, not weeks. Accept the long game. Mastery takes time. Enjoy the process of development itself. Celebrate progress, not just achievement. Stay curious and maintain beginner's mind. Strategy 10. Reframe challenges and failures. Your interpretation of difficulty and setbacks profoundly affects flow accessibility. Challenge as opportunity. When you encounter difficulty, frame it as chance to grow rather than threat of failure. Information about what to improve. Test of developing skills. Natural part of the process. This reframing changes the neurochemical response. Instead of anxiety, threat response, you get focused determination, challenge response. Failure as feedback. Rather than identity-level judgment, treat failures as data points in an experiment, showing where skills need development, clarifying what doesn't work. Necessary steps toward success. Thomas Edison famously reframed repeated failures. I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Growth mindset. Believe that abilities are developable, not fixed. Challenges become exciting, not threatening. Effort becomes path to mastery, not sign of inadequacy. Setbacks become temporary, not permanent. Others' success becomes inspiration, not threat. This mindset, researched extensively by Carol Dweck, is strongly associated with flow accessibility. Process focus. Emphasize process over outcome. I gave my best effort versus I won lost. I'm developing this skill versus I am not good at this. I engaged fully versus the result was perfect imperfect. This reduces performance anxiety and increases intrinsic motivation, both flow conducive. Self-compassion. When struggling, respond with kindness rather than harsh self-judgment. Acknowledge difficulty without self-blame. Recognize imperfection as human. Offer yourself support and encouragement. Kristen Neff's research shows self-compassion increases resilience and risk-taking, both important for flow. Part 6. Sustaining the zone long-term benefits and integration. We've explored what flow is, how it works, and how to cultivate it. Now let's examine the long-term implications and benefits of making flow a regular part of your life. Enhanced productivity, the multiplier effect. Flow doesn't just make you slightly more productive, it multiplies your output dramatically. Research from McKinsey found that executives reported being 5 times more productive in flow. This makes intuitive sense when you consider. Focused attention eliminates wasted time from distraction and context switching. Reduced errors and rework because of heightened clarity. Faster processing speeds due to neurochemical enhancement. Better quality output due to peak cognitive performance. Sustained effort without burnout because the work itself is rewarding. But the productivity gains compound over time. When you're in flow, you learn faster, so skills develop more rapidly. You're more creative, generating better solutions. You're more motivated, maintaining consistency. You build positive associations with challenging work. Over months and years, People who regularly access flow develop capabilities far beyond what seem possible with ordinary effort. This is part of why top performers in any field, whether sports, arts, science, or business, regularly report flow experiences. Flow isn't just a nice-to-have, it's a competitive advantage. The practical implication: even small increases in flow frequency have outsized impacts. If you could spend just 1 more hour per day in flow, over a year, that's 365 additional hours of peak performance. That kind of focused work can accomplish what might take thousands of hours at ordinary productivity levels. Amplified creativity, innovation's secret weapon. Flow is intimately connected to creativity and innovation. Several mechanisms explain this. Neural connectivity. During flow, communication between brain regions increases. This allows for novel combinations of ideas. You're drawing on disparate knowledge and making unexpected connections. Pattern recognition. The dopamine surge enhances your ability to spot patterns and relationships. Problems that seemed unrelated suddenly reveal underlying similarities. Reduced inhibition. With the prefrontal cortex partially deactivated, the usual filters and judgments quiet down. Ideas that your conscious mind might dismiss as silly or impossible can emerge and be explored. Risk tolerance. In flow, you're less afraid of failure, more willing to try unconventional approaches. Many breakthroughs require this willingness to explore uncertain territory. Implicit processing. Flow accesses deeply stored knowledge and patterns that aren't available to conscious thought. The solution that just comes to you is actually sophisticated pattern matching happening below conscious awareness. History is full of breakthrough insights occurring during flow states. Scientists describe solutions appearing during moments of complete absorption. Artists speak of work flowing through them. Entrepreneurs describe business insights emerging during deep work sessions. The implication for creative work: structuring your creative process to include flow time is essential. This might mean extended, uninterrupted blocks for creative work, alternating active work with incubation periods, where unconscious processing continues, working on challenging creative problems regularly so flow becomes available, creating conditions that support creative risk-taking, accelerated learning, mastery's fast track. Flow is an optimal state for learning. The neurochemical cocktail released during flow, particularly dopamine, enhances neuroplasticity, making it easier for your brain to form and strengthen neural connections. When you practice something in flow, neural pathways involved in that skill are reinforced more strongly. The skill is encoded more deeply and retained more durably. The learning feels rewarding, creating positive associations. You practice with full attention, which is crucial for effective learning. This means flow doesn't just let you perform at your current best, it accelerates your development toward higher levels of capability. Research on expert performers consistently shows that the hours of practice aren't equal. An hour of deeply focused, challenging practice is worth far more than an hour of distracted, easy practice. Flow represents the upper end of practice quality. For anyone serious about skill development, seek flow during practice sessions, not just performance. Structure practice to hit the challenge skill's sweet spot. Use feedback intensively to accelerate learning loops. Reflect on flow sessions to consolidate learning. The implication: if you could increase the percentage of your practice time spent in flow even modestly, you would develop skills far faster than would otherwise be possible. Increased happiness and well-being, the intrinsic reward. Beyond instrumental benefits, flow is inherently rewarding. Csikszentmihalyi's research found that flow experiences are among the most satisfying moments of people's lives, more satisfying than passive pleasures, more meaningful than material achievements. This makes evolutionary sense. Flow is your brain rewarding you for operating at the edge of your capabilities, for growth, for engagement with meaningful challenges. The neurochemical cocktail creates a natural high: pleasure, satisfaction, meaning all at once. Long-term, regular flow experiences contribute to life satisfaction. People who frequently experience flow report higher overall life satisfaction. They find their days meaningful and engaging. Sense of purpose. Flow often occurs during activities connected to personal values and goals. Regular flow reinforces that your life is spent on what matters to you. Resilience. Flow builds confidence in your ability to meet challenges. This creates a generalized sense of agency and capability that helps weather difficulties. Reduced anxiety and depression. Flow provides respite from rumination and self-focus. The positive neurochemistry also has mood-regulating effects. While flow isn't a cure for clinical mental health issues, it's a significant protective factor. Present moment living. Flow trains presence. Over time, this capacity extends beyond flow sessions. You become more able to be present and engaged with ordinary life. Intrinsic motivation. Regularly experiencing flow shifts your relationship with challenges. Difficult tasks become opportunities for engagement rather than threats. This makes life feel more like adventure than obligation. The practical implication. Pursuing flow isn't selfish or indulgent. It's a legitimate path to well-being. Making time for activities that generate flow is as important for mental health as exercise is for physical health. The social dimension, relationships and collective impact. While we focused largely on individual flow, the collective dimension is equally important. When people regularly experience flow, it affects their relationships and communities. Individual flow makes you more present and engaged with others, less anxious and reactive, more confident and open, more energized and positive. These qualities naturally improve relationships. You're better company, a better colleague, a better friend. Group flow creates shared peak experiences that bond people. Teams that have experienced collective flow develop stronger trust and cohesion, better communication, shared sense of capability, positive associations with collaboration. Organizations where flow is common culture-wise tend to be more innovative and adaptive, higher performing, more satisfying places to work, better at retaining talent. The societal implications are significant. Imagine if more people had regular access to flow. If work, education, and leisure were designed to facilitate it, we'd likely see greater productivity and innovation, better mental health and life satisfaction, more engaged citizenship and community participation, less destructive escape behaviors, addiction, excessive consumption. This isn't utopian fantasy. Some organizations and communities are already demonstrating these benefits by prioritizing flow-conducive conditions. The dark sides, important caveats. Before becoming too evangelical about flow, it's important to acknowledge potential downsides and misuses. Flow addiction. The state is so rewarding that it can become compulsive. Some people pursue flow to the exclusion of other important life domains, relationships, health, responsibilities. Rock climbers risk death for flow. Workaholics neglect families. The key is balance. Ethical concerns. Flow is amoral. You can experience it doing harmful activities. A hacker penetrating systems unethically, a gambler risking everything, even a soldier in combat. Flow is possible in all these contexts. Flow enhances performance but doesn't guarantee the performance is good or ethical. Wisdom about when and where to pursue flow is essential. Narrow focus risk. Flow's intense focus can create tunnel vision. You might miss important peripheral information or fail to question fundamental assumptions. Sometimes stepping back from flow to evaluate direction is necessary. Inequality of access. Not everyone has equal opportunity to experience flow. Poverty, oppressive work conditions, lack of education or opportunity. These barriers prevent many people from accessing flow activities. Being mindful of privilege when discussing flow is important. Recovery neglect. The pressure to maintain constant high performance can lead people to pursue flow unsustainably, without adequate recovery. This leads to burnout. Escape versus engagement. Sometimes what looks like flow is actually dissociation or escapism, using intense focus to avoid dealing with problems. True flow emerges from engagement with meaningful challenges, not flight from difficulty. The solution isn't to avoid flow, but to pursue it wisely, ethically, sustainably, and in balance with other life needs and values. The future of flow, emerging research and technologies. Flow research continues to evolve. Several emerging areas are particularly interesting. Neurofeedback, technologies that provide real-time feedback about brain state. Some research suggests people can learn to intentionally shift into flow-associated brainwave patterns through neurofeedback training. Consumer devices like Muse are making this accessible. Flow prediction, wearable sensors monitoring physiological signals, heart rate variability, skin conductance, etc., might predict when you're entering or leaving flow, allowing you to optimize timing and conditions. Flow augmentation, controversial but being researched. Can substances, devices, or techniques artificially induce or enhance flow? Some studies look at nootropics, transcranial stimulation, or specific sensory inputs. The ethics and efficacy remain debated. Virtual reality. VR creates immersive environments that might facilitate flow by eliminating external distractions and providing perfectly calibrated challenge. Some applications are exploring this for training, therapy, and peak performance. Collective flow platforms. Digital tools designed to facilitate group flow for distributed teams, handling communication, feedback, and challenge balancing automatically. Flow in education. Reforming educational systems to prioritize flow experiences rather than passive learning. Some schools are experimenting with flow-based curricula where students work on appropriately challenging problems with immediate feedback. Flow at scale. Organizational and societal interventions to increase flow accessibility. This includes workplace design, policy changes, urban planning, and cultural shifts. Personalized flow profiles. Research suggests people might have individual flow signatures, specific conditions and activities that work best for them. Future tools might help identify your personal flow profile. The trajectory seems clear. Flow will move from being a somewhat mystical state that happens accidentally to a well-understood phenomenon that can be systematically cultivated. The practical applications across performance, learning, creativity, and well-being are enormous. Integration, making flow a way of life. Ultimately, the goal isn't to occasionally experience flow, but to make it a regular, integrated part of your life. This means identity shift, seeing yourself as someone who prioritizes flow, making decisions about work, relationships, and lifestyle that support flow accessibility. Values alignment, ensuring your flow activities connect to your deepest values. Flow in service of what matters most to you creates meaning, not just achievement. Multiple domains, developing flow opportunities in different life areas, work, creative pursuits, physical activities, social interactions. This creates balance and prevents over-identification with any single domain. Life design, structuring your life, career, schedule, environment, relationships to maximize flow opportunities. This might mean unconventional choices, but the payoff in satisfaction and performance is substantial. Continuous refinement, treating flow cultivation as an ongoing practice. You never master, flow, and stop. You continue learning, adapting, refining your approach. Sharing, teaching others about flow, creating conditions for group flow, contributing to cultures that value flow. The benefits multiply when shared. Perspective, holding flow lightly. It's important but not everything. Sometimes presence without intensity, rest without productivity, being without achieving, these matter too. Conclusion, your flow journey begins now. We've covered extraordinary ground in this exploration of flow state. The phenomenology of flow, what it feels like and why it matters. The neuroscience, the brain regions, neurochemicals, and electrical patterns involved, the psychological triggers and conditions that enable flow, the attentional and emotional factors that support or hinder it, practical strategies for cultivating flow systematically, the long-term benefits across productivity, creativity, learning, and well-being, important caveats, and the future of flow research. But all of this information is just potential until you apply it. Flow isn't something you understand intellectually, it's something you experience directly. Reading about flow is like reading about swimming. At some point, you need to get in the water. Your flow journey is unique. The activities that create flow for you, the conditions you need, the challenges that optimally engage your capabilities, these are personal. You'll need to experiment, discover, refine. Start somewhere. Choose one domain where you want to experience more flow. Maybe it's your work, a creative pursuit, an athletic activity, or a skill you're developing. Apply the principles we've discussed. Set clear goals for specific sessions. Ensure immediate feedback mechanisms. Find the challenge skills sweet spot for your current level. Create a distraction-free environment. Develop a pre-flow ritual. Practice attention, training through meditation or mindfulness. Optimize your physiology, sleep, nutrition. Exercise. Reframe challenges as opportunities. Commit to this for a month. Track your experiences. Notice what works and what doesn't. Adjust your approach based on what you learn. You'll likely find that even small improvements in flow frequency and depth have outsized impacts on your performance, satisfaction, and sense of meaning. An hour of flow is worth more than many hours of distracted, half-hearted effort. Remember that flow is natural. You already have the capacity. Every human brain can enter this state. You've probably experienced it before, perhaps without recognizing it. The goal isn't to create something foreign, but to access more reliably and deeply what you're already capable of. Flow represents a kind of optimal human functioning, complete engagement, peak performance, intrinsic reward, rapid learning, creative breakthrough, all simultaneously. It's perhaps the closest we come to experiencing our full potential. In a world of increasing distraction, fragmentation, and surface-level engagement, flow offers something profound: the possibility of depth, wholeness, and presence, of being fully where you are, doing what you're doing, experiencing life at maximum intensity. The science is clear. Flow is real, accessible, and transformative. The question is, will you pursue it? Your peak performance, your deepest satisfaction, your most rapid growth, your greatest contributions, they're all waiting for you in flow. The doorway is open. Step through.